The snow had fallen quietly overnight, laying down a thin white blanket across the ridges of the Bitterroot Mountains. In the early light, a single set of paw prints traced a winding path through the frost, broad, padded, silent. Beneath a low cedar, half covered in soft snow, lay a shape barely moving, breathing slow. A bobcat, his fur silvered with age, eyes half shut but aware, ears twitching with each gust of wind. And then, just before the sun crested the ridge, he let out a sound. Not a growl, not a mule,
Just a little bit more
something
and we'll be all
gentler,
done.
a short, rhythmic chirp, a sound meant for someone else. But there was no one else. That morning, Anna Dorsey found him there, curled in the same spot he'd returned to every winter for the last 16 years. His coat dusted with flakes, his breath shallow. She didn't call out, just stood at the edge of the fence line, hand resting on the latch, heart caught in that moment between worry and knowing. The sanctuary was quiet that morning, unusually so. Even the wind seemed reluctant to stir. Anna looked down at the old red flannel blanket she'd brought, washed 100 times over, but still carrying the scent of cedar, pine, and home. She laid it across the fence post like she always did, even though he hadn't laid on it
Look
in
at
weeks.
that.
"Bran," she whispered,
They're so sweet
"I
together.
brought your favorite." He didn't move, but his ears flicked again. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when that cat had thunder in his bones and wildfire in his eyes. But life, people, had stolen that from him once, long before he found his way here. Anna looked past the snow-covered trees, back in time, to the fall of 2003, back to the call that changed everything. It was an early October morning when her truck pulled into the roadside animal park just outside of Bridger, Wyoming.
Hey there, little guy.
She wasn't supposed to be there.
You're a beautiful
The place had
creature.
been shut down days ago, seized by authorities for illegal possession
We're
of
here because
wildlife.
the reports of strange
But Anna had
bobcat
gotten a
sightings in the
personal
area.
call from the local ranger, an old friend from her tracking days. "You'll want to see this one yourself," he'd said. "He's not like the others." The facility, if it could be called that, was a patchwork of chain-link cages and weather-worn plywood. The stench hit her before the sight did. Stale meat, urine, old fear. She stepped over broken fencing, past a collapsed aviary, and came to a stop in front of a narrow wire cage the size of a large dog crate. Inside, barely lit by the rising sun, was a young male bobcat, maybe 7 or 8 months old. Fur filthy and patchy, bones too visible beneath the skin, and the eyes, golden, clouded with defeat. But it was the paws that stopped her breath. Bandaged poorly, crusted with dried blood, twisted unnaturally. Crushed in a steel gate, the ranger said softly beside her. On purpose. Vet says they tried to keep him docile, make him less dangerous. Anna said nothing at first, just knelt down, her breath fogging the cold morning air. The cat didn't hiss, didn't flinch, just looked at her like he was already gone. "I'll take him," she said, almost to herself. "He's coming with me." There was no hesitation in her voice. No paperwork needed. Some things you just knew in your bones. The drive back to the sanctuary took over 6 hours. Anna didn't turn on the radio once. The only sound inside the cab was the occasional rustle of the blanket in the crate behind her. And once, a soft, almost childlike chirp. It wasn't a cry, more like a question. It pierced straight through her. By the time they crossed into Montana, dusk was stretching long across the hills. The sanctuary sat on the edge of a forested valley, backed by snowy ridges and fed by a winding creek. A place built for healing, for second chances, mostly for injured birds, foxes, and once even a bear cub, but never anything like this. She opened the back of the truck slowly, kneeling by the crate. The bobcat's eyes glinted in the lantern light, tired but alert. "We'll call you Bran," she said gently. "That was my brother's name. He used to say bobcats were just house cats, who remembered how to be wild. The next few weeks were quiet. Anna moved Bran into a recovery enclosure. Soft earth, thick straw, and walls lined with cedar limbs. She didn't push him, just left food, cleaned quietly, and sat nearby. Sometimes with a book, sometimes just listening to the wind. Dr. Callum Reyes came by twice a week to check on Bran's paws. The damage was worse than they feared. The bones had been shattered, likely intentionally. A poor attempt to keep him from climbing, fighting, living. Worse still, he'd been neutered young. His hormones permanently stunted. "He won't ever go back to the wild," Dr. Reyes said one morning, wrapping a fresh bandage around Bran's forelimb. "But that doesn't mean he won't find his place." Anna nodded, but didn't reply. The pain meds helped. So did time. By late December, Bran was walking again, though with a limp. He still avoided people, slipping behind the cedar limbs any time someone new approached. But with Anna, he began to linger. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her through the branches. Other times, she'd hear him chirp softly when she arrived. Not the frightened noise from the crate, something softer. Almost like a greeting. She started bringing him small pieces of chicken, still warm. Once, she set a feather down beside his food bowl. The next morning, it was gone. One snowy night in January, Anna sat by his enclosure longer than usual. Her hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of everything else. She'd found the old photo again. The one of her and Bran, her brother, at 12 and 15. Standing by the edge of the woods, a spotted bobcat paw print pressed in the mud between them. It had been his dream to start this sanctuary. He'd never lived long enough to see it. Anna placed the photo near the gate of Bran's enclosure and leaned against the fence. She didn't speak, just listened to the hush of falling snow. Behind her, something shifted. A soft footstep, a breath. Then, Bran pressed his head gently against the chain link, just above the photo. A slow blink. Wordless, present. Anna's eyes welled up, not from sadness, but from the strange comfort of being seen. From that night on, something between them changed. It was no longer about rescue. It wasn't about healing even. It was about trust. Unspoken, earned, shared. The kind of bond that doesn't ask for anything but presence. The kind that stays quiet when the world is too loud. Spring came late that year. Snow still clung to the ridgelines as if reluctant to let go. The days grew longer, though, and with the melt came noise. Birds returning, branches creaking with new buds, and the soft, steady pulse of creek water finding its song again. Bran had grown stronger. His coat, once dull and matted, now shimmered in the afternoon light. He walked with a limp, yes, but there was rhythm in it. Grace. He'd taken to sunning himself on the flat stone by the cedar tree, ears swiveling toward every breeze. Watching, always watching. Anna had kept to her quiet routine. Mornings at the enclosure, a cup of coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other. Sometimes she talked to him. Sometimes she just sat. Bran had started doing something new. Whenever she approached, he'd chirp, not loud, just enough, as if to say, "I see you." It had become their ritual. Then came the call, late April. A ranger up north had found a bobcat kitten alone on the side of a highway. No sign of the mother, no injuries. But the little thing was barely 4 weeks old, far too young to survive alone. The plan had been simple. Set up a warm crate in the infirmary, rotate bottle-feeding shifts. The kitten, all fluff and wide blue eyes, cried constantly. Anna named him Whistle because of the high-pitched trill he made when hungry. For the first few days, Whistle stayed inside. But the sanctuary was at capacity. Every cage, every room was in use. Only for a day or two, Lyle Brennan, the center's director, said. Just until we get the nursery cleared. They moved Whistle into a temporary pen adjacent to Bran's enclosure. The two were separated by a tall wooden fence with a chain-link top, just enough for visibility and sound to travel between them. Anna had her concerns. Bran had never been near another feline since his arrival. Adult male bobcats were notoriously solitary. In the wild, they'd sooner run off a kitten than share space with it. But on that first afternoon, Bran didn't retreat. Instead, he pressed himself against the fence, shoulder to cedar, nose angled toward the tiny cries next door. Anna noticed. He stayed there all night. Even after the wind picked up and sleet rattled the branches. By morning, there were paw prints circling the fence line. Whistle had begun mimicking them, pacing in tandem, chirping through the wire. Dr. Reyes observed from a distance. He's communicating, he said quietly. And the kitten's responding. That's unexpected. Anna didn't say what she felt. That something far older, far deeper was stirring in Bran. Something that couldn't be explained by instinct alone. She left the red flannel blanket near the fence that night. Whistle curled up beside it. Bran stayed awake until dawn, his eyes never leaving the little form on the other side. The sanctuary was split on what to do. Some feared aggression, others urged caution. But Anna knew. Bran had chosen. He remembered what it was to be alone. And now, maybe, he remembered what it was to not be. Anna didn't sleep much the night before the decision. She sat by her cabin window, mug of chamomile untouched, watching the pines sway beneath the moon. Every instinct in her said no, said it was too soon, too risky. But Bran's behavior hadn't changed, not in the usual way. No signs of agitation, no pacing, no retraction, only stillness, only focus. By morning, she made her choice. They would try. The plan was cautious, minimal risk, controlled setting. 2 staff members on standby, tranquilizers prepped just in case. Anna opened the connecting gate between Bran's enclosure and the smaller pen where Whistle was curled up in a ball of fuzz and bones. Bran stepped forward slowly, every movement measured. He didn't lunge or sniff or puff up. He simply walked in, head low, tail neutral. Whistle squeaked once, then darted behind a log. Bran didn't follow. Instead, he lay down and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20, and then, slowly, the kitten peeked out. His tiny nose twitched. Step by hesitant step, he approached Bran, whose eyes remained half-lidded, almost bored. Then, Whistle chirped. Bran's ears perked. He returned the chirp, softer this time, like an echo from a deeper place. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Bran reached out with one battered paw and gently tapped the kitten's side. What followed looked like ritual. Bran began grooming Whistle's ears, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence. Whistle leaned into it, purring, an actual rumbling kitten purr. Anna's hand covered her mouth. Her chest ached, but she couldn't name the emotion yet, only that it was raw and full. Dr. Reyes shook his head. "I've seen wild things do wild things," he murmured. "But this is something else." From that day forward, Whistle followed Bran everywhere. Their bond wasn't just survival, it was something spiritual. Bran taught him how to stalk shadows and crouch low before a pounce. They played in the dust at dusk, took naps curled in opposite corners of the den. And at night, you'd hear them chirping to each other, soft and steady. Bran began to change too. His gait grew more fluid. He ate more. He'd stretch after waking, paws high in the air, tail flicking like a cat decades younger. But it wasn't just joy. It was purpose. Anna once caught a moment that stayed with her for years. A storm had rolled through that afternoon, thunder distant but sharp. Whistle had spooked, hiding under a plank near the feeding trough. Bran didn't force him out. He just sat nearby. Then, very slowly, lay down with his side touching the wood. A barrier, a guard, a promise. Anna whispered into the dusk. You remember, don't you? What it felt like to need someone who didn't come. Bran blinked at her from across the fence, then turned back toward Whistle, letting out one long, low chirp. The wind didn't answer, but it carried the sound far into the trees. Summer arrived quietly, slipping in through soft rains and longer days. The forest greened, the creek grew lively again, and at the sanctuary, something had shifted. Subtly, but undeniably. Bran was no longer just a resident. He had become a teacher. Whistle had grown, lanky and fast, his kitten roundness giving way to adolescent sleekness. Under Bran's careful watch, he had learned the silent crouch, the tail flick that signals readiness, the pounce that ends with a mouthful of leaves. All of it play. But not just play. It was instruction. Anna often stood just beyond the enclosure, clipboard in hand, pretending to take notes while her heart swelled at the sight of them. Whistle had taken to grooming Bran now, carefully licking behind his ears, pawing gently at his scarred shoulders. It was affection, no doubt, but also imitation. Bran, ever patient, allowed it all. The other animals at the sanctuary began to adjust too. The foxes no longer startled at Bran's low chirps echoing through the trees. The owls took to perching closer at dusk, as if drawn by something unspoken. Visitors came less often in the summer heat, but the few who did were told only part of the story. He's a mentor, Lyle would say, a kind of foster parent. Strange, yeah, but we just let nature take the lead. But Anna knew it was more. One late evening, after the staff had gone, she sat by the cedar tree as the sun dipped low, casting gold across the valley. Bran was lying nearby, his head resting on his forelegs, eyes open but slow blinking. Whistle dozed against his belly. Anna pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat. It was a letter, her brother's, written when he was 16, the year before the accident. It read, "Wild things don't stay, but they remember. Maybe one day, we'll build a place where they don't have to run to be safe." She hadn't read it in years, but tonight, it felt right. She read it aloud, voice quiet, words trailing into the trees. Bran didn't move, but when she finished, he let out that soft, low chirp. Anna closed her eyes. It felt like acknowledgement. The next morning, Whistle was gone. Not vanished, just grown enough, bold enough, ready. He'd found a gap in the outer fencing and slipped away into the woods. His tracks led to the ridge, paused by the river, then vanished into the deeper brush. They didn't try to bring him back. Anna found Bran lying by the fence that day, staring out toward the hills. He didn't chirp, didn't eat, just lay there, still. That night, he refused food for the first time since his arrival. Dr. Reyes said it might be nothing, but Anna knew better. "He's grieving," she said quietly. "He let go. Now he's feeling it." And that grief, silent, unmoving, undeniable, was proof. Proof that love, in whatever form it takes, leaves its mark, even on the wild. The days that followed were quiet. Bran spent most of his time near the fence line where Whistle had slipped through. He didn't pace. He didn't call. He just waited, as if the little one might come bounding back through the brush at any moment. But of course, he didn't. Anna tried not to let the stillness settle in her chest. She busied herself with tasks around the sanctuary, checking food logs, repairing netting, refilling feeders. But every afternoon, she'd find herself drifting back toward Bran's pen. Sometimes she'd bring his favorite meal, quail with a touch of liver. Other times, she'd sit on the bench just outside the enclosure, reading aloud from old journals or letters. She wasn't sure if Bran listened, but she knew he heard. Then, one morning, a new sound broke the routine. A call came in from a wildlife agent 3 counties over. A bobcat kitten, barely 3 weeks old, had been found in a barn, alone, its mother likely struck by a tractor days before. 2 days later, another call, then a third. By the end of the week, there were 5 orphaned bobcat kittens in need of care, all under 6 weeks old. The staff was overwhelmed. There weren't enough trained hands to bottle feed and stimulate, to socialize without humanizing. They needed help. Fast. Anna stood in the feed room, eyes scanning a whiteboard filled with assignments, her chest tight. "We can't raise them all without losing their wildness," Lyle said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "We can't give them what they need." Anna turned toward the back window, where Bran lay beneath the cedar tree. "Maybe we don't have to," she said. No one answered at first, but Dr. Reyes, standing quietly in the corner, finally nodded. "It's his choice. Always has been." That afternoon, they introduced the first pair, 2 small siblings with oversized ears and nervous eyes. They were placed in the connected enclosure, separated by the same fence Bran had once watched whistle through. Bran approached cautiously, sniffed the air, chirped once. The kittens huddled together, tiny bodies trembling. And Bran, in that slow, deliberate way of his, lay down beside the fence. He didn't reach out, didn't press, just rested there, presence alone. Within an hour, one kitten chirped back. By nightfall, both had curled up along the fence line. The following morning, the staff opened the gate. The kittens darted in, ears flat, unsure. But Bran didn't move. He let them approach on their terms. Within 3 days, they followed him like shadows. And so began a rhythm no one had predicted. Every few days, a new orphan arrived. A trio from the East Valley, a lone female from the canyon. By week's end, 9 kittens filled the enclosure. Bran, the old scarred quiet one, had become the center of a storm of fur and chaos. But he didn't falter. He groomed. He guided. He guarded. And once, just once, Anna saw something she'd never forget. It was dawn. The sky still lilac and cold. One of the younger kittens had climbed too high on the branch and panicked, crying loudly. Before she could reach the gate, Bran was already there, standing beneath, making soft chirps, pawing gently at the base. The kitten stilled, took one breath, then climbed down, shaky but safe. At the base of the branch, Bran pressed his forehead gently against the kitten's. Anna felt something inside her unwind. Something she hadn't even known was knotted. It wasn't just that Bran had accepted them. It was that he'd remembered what it meant to need safety, and had become it for others. The days turned longer, soaked in gold and the scent of pine. By midsummer, Bran's enclosure looked more like a forest classroom than a rehabilitation space. The 9 kittens, rambunctious, wild, endlessly curious, treated every rock as a mountain, every bug as prey, and every twitch of Bran's tail as an irresistible invitation. Bran, now older and moving slower, never once lashed out. When they played too rough, he responded with gentle correction, a paw pressed firm, a low chirp that froze them in place. He taught them restraint, awareness, patience. Anna watched it all unfold like something sacred. Each kitten developed differently. One was bold and brash, often leaping before looking. Another would hide feathers in the brush like buried treasure. One little female, who they nicknamed Flicker, insisted on sleeping curled against Bran's side every night. He allowed it, without fail. Dr. Reyes began documenting it all. "We're witnessing a behavioral outlier," he'd mutter while scribbling in his leather-bound field journal. "There's no precedent for this in wild males." But Anna wasn't interested in precedent. She was interested in Bran. He had found his purpose, not by accident, but by choosing. Again and again, the sanctuary buzzed with quiet awe. Volunteers paused during chores to peek into Bran's world. Lyle brought visitors out only in small, respectful groups. No loud voices, no flash photography, just silence and wonder. One morning, a journalist from a wildlife publication arrived. She was skeptical at first, polite, but guarded. "You're saying a traumatized, neutered male bobcat is successfully raising wild orphans?" she asked, recorder in hand. Anna didn't try to convince her. She simply led her to the enclosure. They arrived just in time to see Bran crouched in the shade, eyes locked on one of the kittens as it stalked a cricket through the tall grass. The others were scattered around, mimicking his every movement. It wasn't about the cricket. It was about the watchful gaze, the steady presence, the living, breathing reminder that they were not alone. The journalist lowered her recorder. "Well," she whispered, "I'll be damned." That afternoon, thunder rolled across the hills. Not a storm, just a warning. The kittens huddled near the den. Bran paced slowly, checking each one, his movements deliberate despite the stiffness in his legs. Later, after the skies cleared, Anna sat near his fence with a worn-out flannel tucked over her knees, the same one she'd left beside him all those winters ago. "You're still doing it," she murmured, "still giving them something no one gave you." Bran looked up from where he lay, surrounded by sleeping kittens. He didn't move, just blinked once, long and slow, a quiet acknowledgement. That night, the coyotes sang across the ridge. Inside the enclosure, Bran stood guard until dawn. It was the first snow of the season, early, unexpected, soft, the kind that whispers instead of howls, the kind that turns breath into steam and footsteps into echoes. The sanctuary was quiet that morning. Even the birds seemed caught off guard. Anna stood by the cedar fence, wrapped in her brother's old jacket, watching the kittens tumble through the powder like it was something enchanted. Snowflakes clung to their whiskers, their ears, their little pink noses. But Bran didn't play. He watched, and for the first time in weeks, Anna noticed a hitch in his step, a stiffness that hadn't been there before. He moved more slowly, curling beside the red stone under the cedar rather than joining in the chaos. Dr. Reyes confirmed it later that afternoon. His arthritis had worsened. His breathing, too, lungs aging, heart slowing. "He's still alert," Reyes said gently. "Still present? But the winter will be harder this time." Anna didn't reply. She just nodded and looked out the window. That evening, she sat with Bran, just outside the enclosure, the flannel blanket laid across her lap. "You can rest, you know," she whispered. "You've already done more than any of us ever expected." Bran didn't move, but one of the kittens, Flicker, curled up beside him, pressing her tiny body against his ribs like she was trying to become part of his breath. And in that moment, Anna knew. He wasn't done yet. 3 days later, the storm came. A blizzard unlike anything the region had seen in over a decade. Whiteout winds, trees bowing under the weight of ice, roads impassable, and in the middle of it, a call. 9 orphaned kittens, rescued from 2 separate dens lost in the storm. Their mothers never found, all underfed, all shivering. The sanctuary scrambled. There wasn't enough staff, not enough time. Anna stared at the intake sheet, hands trembling. Elle entered the office, covered in snow, breath ragged. "I know what you're thinking," he said. "He's old. It's too much." Anna looked at the photo pinned to the corkboard. Her and her brother, mud on their boots, a bobcat track between them. "But he's the only one who can save them," she replied. And so they tried. The introductions happened in pairs. Bran remained calm, patient. Each kitten approached with caution, chirped nervously, then folded into his warmth like pieces returning to a whole. Within 2 days, all 9 were sleeping in a pile beside him. The old red blanket had been moved into the den, tucked beneath Bran and the kittens. Its scent mixed with cedar, fir, and something ancient, something wild and true. Anna spent those nights just outside, wrapped in her brother's jacket, her breath fogging the cold glass as she watched. Bran moved slower now. His grooming sessions took longer, but his presence was no less powerful. He taught them to wait before they pounced, to listen before they ran, to trust the silence. And at dawn, when the birds returned to the trees, he chirped, one long, low note that hung in the air like prayer. A call to the wild, a farewell not yet spoken, but coming. Winter deepened. The sun, when it appeared, hung low and soft, casting long shadows across the snow-packed ground. The kittens had grown stronger, wilder. Their coats thickened, eyes sharpened. They no longer climbed over one another in play. Now they moved with intention, quiet, capable. Bran remained their anchor. But Anna could see the toll. He slept more, ate less. When he walked, his back legs trembled ever so slightly. And yet, whenever a new scent stirred the wind or a hawk circled overhead, he was the first to rise, always the protector. One morning, Anna arrived early. The cold had painted the trees in frost, and Bran was sitting alone at the far edge of the enclosure, staring into the woods. The kittens were curled together in the den. She approached slowly, heart heavy with a truth she wasn't ready to speak. Bran turned his head. Their eyes met. She knelt at the fence, fingers wrapping through the chain link. "I see you," she whispered. "I always have." That afternoon, the first 2 kittens were deemed ready for release. Wild enough, strong enough. Carriers were brought out, tags logged, vitals checked. Bran watched in silence as they were carried past. He let out a single, low chirp. Anna had to turn away. The releases continued over the following weeks. One by one, the kittens disappeared into the hills, never looking back. A few lingered at the tree line before vanishing. But not Flicker. She refused to leave. Twice, she was brought to the transport gate. Twice, she broke free and returned to Bran's side. Eventually, Anna stopped trying. "Maybe some of us aren't meant to run," she told Dr. Reyes. "Maybe we're meant to stay, to remember." The final snowfall came in March. Thick, slow, beautiful. Anna found Bran beneath the cedar, his head resting on the red flannel, breath shallow. Flicker lay beside him, her small body pressed to his chest. She didn't speak, just opened the gate and stepped inside. Kneeling beside him, Anna pressed her forehead gently to his. The scent of pine and fir and time itself filled her lungs. "You can rest now," she said, her voice barely audible. "You did more than anyone ever asked." That night, Bran passed in his sleep. Peaceful, warm, surrounded by the memory of every life he helped shape. When Anna found him at dawn, he was curled on the blanket, Flicker still beside him, unmoving. No struggle, no sound, only stillness. Outside, the first bird of spring sang from the trees. A sound like dawn breaking. A sound like goodbye. They buried Bran beneath the cedar tree. Anna chose the spot herself, where the sunlight broke through the branches just right in the early morning. A place he'd always returned to, no matter the season. She laid the red flannel blanket beneath him, then covered him with cedar boughs and river stones carried from the creek by every member of the sanctuary staff. Flicker remained nearby through the whole morning. She didn't interfere, just watched, her golden eyes quiet and unreadable. When it was done, Anna placed a carved stone at the head of the grave. It bore no name, just the outline of a paw print and a single word, etched deep into the granite. Keeper. Because that's what he had become. Not a pet, not a ward, but a keeper of instincts, of healing, of the sacred bridge between the wild and the broken. Word of Brand's passing spread quickly. Letters arrived from across the country, from wildlife centers that had sent orphans to him, from biologists who had once doubted and then believed, from children who had followed his story online. Some sent feathers, others sent drawings, a few sent fur from kittens who had once chirped back at him in the dark. Flicker never left. She lived out her life at the sanctuary, wild but tethered, not by enclosure, but by memory. She often slept on the same sun-warmed stones Brand once claimed. She never bonded with another animal, but she thrived. And every spring, without fail, she'd sit beneath the cedar and chirp just once, toward the hills. A call, a prayer, a promise. Years passed. New kittens came, new volunteers arrived. But the protocols remained Brand's. Minimal human contact. Species-appropriate interaction. Wild hearts protected, not tamed. In the education center, a display was built. At its center, a photo. Brand lying with 9 kittens draped over him like vines. Around it, quotes from those who knew him. Anna's read. He didn't just remember what it was to be wild. He remembered what it was to be alone. And then he chose to be something else. Anna still visits the cedar most mornings. She brings coffee. Sometimes just sits. She speaks to him softly, not expecting answers. And sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, she swears she hears it. A chirp, distant, soft, carried on the breeze like breath. A final gesture, a legacy, because some creatures never leave. They become the place, the lesson, the keeper of the wild in all of us.